Hey everybody, Hofstad Swords here and welcome back to another episode of the Russian campaign. So a quick summary of the campaign after the invasion. When Napoleon did invade, the Russian army was split in two. Barclay's northern army retreated all the way to Drissa, and Bagration was to the south and in danger of destruction. So Napoleon decided to send Davout and Jerome south to try and pin and destroy. This failed and the army managed to escape the cordon. Napoleon recognized the army could still be separated though, so he sent Davout to block the northern routes and Jerome to keep pursuing, while the rest of the army by Vilnius would turn towards Drissa and attack Barclay de Tolly. Between the 8th and 10th of July, the first real combat occurred by the town of Mir, and this was an engagement between Jerome's frontal cavalry groups and Bagration's rear guard. Oddly enough, the Russian word Mir means peace. Essentially, three Polish lancer divisions charged into the village of Mir and were ambushed by 8 Cossack regiments under General Matvey Platov. They got their asses handed to them, and it did not help that the army was so far behind that very little reinforcements can come up. And this is an excellent example of Cossack hit-and-run tactics. The battle lasted for about 6 hours, with about 700 Poles being lost out of 3,000 and 180 Russians out of 9,000. Due to this loss and lack of in-battle replacements, Jerome decided to slow down to a snail pace to avoid something like that happening again. So by the time Jerome reached Nevizh on the 14th, Napoleon had learnt that his brother's pace was much slower than he wanted, and to punish his brother, the army would be placed under Davout's direct command. You know what Jerome did? He threw a giant hissy fit. Fuck it, I'm out, deal with the Russians yourself, stuff you. That's right, Jerome pussied off out of the army and went back to his comfy home and castle.
Loser.
Fucking beta.
Do you even Russia?
Now, since arriving in Vilnius, Napoleon was working on two things. The first was, of course, the administration of the army, and the second was also organizing Lithuania, where he signed a document establishing the Grand Duchy. He did this under the hope that this could raise more troops and establish a rear guard for all the others out in front. He was 43 at this time, and most of his mind was focused on politics. In his early career, he did not have to deal with all the bureaucratic bullshit, and he turned into a military god. But when you have to deal with all the crap that comes along with being an emperor, you kinda lose your spark for managing your armies. Staying at Vilnius for this long was considered a dire mistake, as this lag killed almost all of his initiative. Now, while Jerome and Davout were southeast dealing with Bagration, Napoleon decided to attack Drissa. He knew the encampment was heavily fortified, so he decided on a flanking route across the Dvina to the east and attacked from the rear. The forces consisted of Murat's cavalry supported by Oudinot and Ney. Now, this attack would do one of two things. The Russians would stand and fight and inevitably be defeated, or they would retreat in the direction of St. Petersburg and widen the gap between the Russian armies. After his 2-week stay in Vilnius, he moved east and set up his command post at Globokia on the 18th, but the following day Murat sent a messenger that the Russians had noticed the French advance, had packed up, burnt all their shit, and moved out of the Drissa camp towards the southeast. Napoleon judged this move incorrectly and moved the three armies to Kamenn, thinking that Barclay was going to try and move in Bagration's direction, but he realized that Barclay was not moving that far south and adjusted his forces to set up at Bichnowski, southwest of Vitebsk. There were two battles between the 23rd and the 26th of July. The Battle of Megillah occurred on the 23rd. Now, as I said before, Davout's job was to keep the army separated by forcing a march directly east to ward off Bagration. After Minsk, the army kept marching forward and captured the town of Megillah. At the same time, Bagration had crossed the Berezina River at Bobrowisk and turned north towards Megillah with the aim of reaching Vitebsk and uniting with Barclay's army. Obviously, Davout was in the way, so they had to try and get past him and open up the crossing across the Dnieper River. Bagration sent one of his corps, the 7th under Raevski, to assault the village. Initially only encountering 3 French divisions of infantry, at first they managed to capture the village, but a counter-attack by General Desaix forced a retreat from the Russians. Bagration had to go backward and was forced to cross the river at a different location. The next battle occurred on the 25th of July, and this managed to see the first major engagement between Barclay and Napoleon's armies. Nansuti's 1st Cavalry Corps engaged the rear guard of the Russians at the village of Ostronovo with not so good results. The Russian armies were still getting into position at Vitebsk and Tolstoy. No, not that one. The leader of the 4th Corps was to delay the French. He was quite successful in this endeavor, and the Russian infantry under his command were able to hold off a wooded passage for quite some time despite large casualties from sustained artillery fire. However, when Tolstoy saw Delzon's division moving against his flank past the woods, he decided to retreat back. A similar story repeated the next day, with Russian forces holding the village of Kakuvechino. Now, here's where Napoleon fucked it. On the 26th, he decided to wait a day for reinforcements to arrive. Now, that's all well and good, but Barclay de Tolly heard about the Battle of Megillah and realized that Bagration wasn't going to join in on the fun. So during the night, the armies lit up fires to make the French that were still there and slipped away during the night. You fucking idiot! I mean, god damn it, Napoleon, they were right fucking there, and all you had to do was march up. You didn't have to wait, you had the chance. I mean, seriously, Napoleon, I love you, but what the fuck? So anyway, after the battle and the French entry into Vitebsk on the 28th, Napoleon kinda had a bit of a breakdown. He was recorded throwing his sword on a desk covered with maps and claiming that the campaign was over and that he would resume it in the spring of 1813. I think we all know that this wasn't the case. Also, fun fact, since the army was halted at Vitebsk and various generals were scattered all over the place, Bagration's army managed to slip past the cordon and reunite with de Tolly at Smolensk on the 1st of August. Now, you'd think that Napoleon would stay put and try to reorganize, but others actually managed to fuck this good idea. Now, this sexhead cunt Marat pointed out that the Russians had united at Smolensk and that Nappy could win his victory there. Davout may have also been on Marat's side, not 100% sure about that. Basically, all the other generals wanted to stay put, and even Berthier grabbed the chief of supply to tell Napoleon that the wagons were getting completely fucked. But nope, Mr. Sexhead got his way and convinced Napoleon to push on to Smolensk. Fuck.